Alexa, and I'm here refuting the claim that that fake news is harming the trust of Americans had in institutions. My opponent's secondary claims were that fake news creates confusion, fake news impacts our political process, and overall fake news makes us more susceptible to believing fake news. My response to his first secondary claim is that in his first secondary claim, he talks about how the Chibok girls were taken from the terrorist group named Boko Haram in Nigeria. I would like to first point out that in his main claim, he states fake news is harming Americans' trust. So to use this evidence is not valid while supporting his main claim. I would like to secondarily point out that the speaker, Stephanie Basari, states that the Nigerians believe this was a hoax and the girls were never kidnapped. And with this statement said, you can see that the whole situation was never brought up with fake information, but denied information until 2 years after, when 21 girls were freed. To use this example of the Chibok girls as support for the fake news creates confusion is irrelevant because this did not bring up confusion and it wasn't in America. My response to his secondary claim is that he states how the government and people can be influenced by manipulation through foreign and political view, but the evidence used does not show any support with statistics, facts, or testimonials. I would like to also point out that there is no, sorry, I already said that. The statements used to argue the political process does not have much effect of any fake news actually being used. And my response to his secondary third claim is the echo chamber effect, where clubs, cliques, and like-minded websites are connected to others like themselves, leading them to saying the same thing within each other. He uses social media as an example, but does not prove the echo chamber effect. He talks more about sharing fake news than the connection of websites to websites and how they are false. He as well does not have no evidence of the echo chamber effect taking place to prove the spread of fake news. This leads back to show he had no evidence that fake news makes us susceptible to more fake news. In conclusion, I responded to the main claim that fake news is harming trust in Americans of institutions, with going against his supporting claims that fake news creates confusion, impacts our political process, and fake news makes us more susceptible to believing more fake news.
Okay, well, the structure is relatively clear because it's pretty simple. You basically challenge the example that the advocate has on the first point by suggesting it's not really an American situation and that it's not really about false information. It's about delayed information or denying information, which I'm not sure I appreciate the distinction that you're drawing here and why that undermines the advocate's argument, or it wouldn't undermine the general public's lack of faith in the sources that are providing this information. There's a couple of presses here, but I'm not exactly sure that the advocate's argument was strong in the first point, but there's no counter evidence. Like you said, on your later point that there's a lack of support for information on point number 2. Well, there's a lack of counter support for any claim going the opposite direction here. I think that's also problematic. The manipulation argument, you basically suggest that there's not really any evidence that the advocate presented, that no statistics or facts or testimony that shows that this kind of manipulation has had any effect. That's a reasonable press to make. I think this is one of those places where you could diminish this argument by showing, for instance, how little impact that actually is. There is, like the supposed Russian manipulation of social media sites amounts to a few dozen ads that they spent money on that passed information around, and the likelihood that it had an impact like for instance, in comparison to what the two campaigns were spending on media, I think you could probably put that into a little bit more perspective. But there's no, you're satisfied here to simply say there's no evidence, and you don't bother to make an argument on the other side, which I think is sitting right there. It's low-hanging fruit. You ought to be able to take advantage of that, so that that's not something that they could come back from. And then the echo chamber effect. You basically challenge whether or not this is really happening, and how is sharing an echo chamber? And I mean, you asked some okay questions, but I don't remember what the advocate's evidence on this particular point was, but I'm not sure that your answers to it, one way or the other, are particularly convincing either. So, battling it out to a tie, I suppose, does seem like it's a victory to some degree, but I'm not sure I'm completely convinced that you've given us as strong an argument as you could. All right, thank you.